Okay, all right. So welcome everyone to our first session of the program, formal session, shall we say, regarding the problem solution fit. Hopefully the first week, last week was good. You guys talking to your mentors and setting the ground for all the work that you'll be doing and what you've done so far up to this point. So before we get going completely, just some quick reminders. Please sign up to Slack if you haven't. I love seeing all of you in there chiming in once in a while. Please do so. And complete your pre-program survey if you haven't. I think for those of you who haven't, I Slacked you specifically. So please complete that. That really helps us to really keep track of connect the dots at the end of the program to see what change actually took place. There will be a formative survey as well that's ongoing and continuously live. And in fact, I should probably put that in the chat right now. And you guys can use that at any time to just tell us what's working, what isn't, what needs to change. So, but any feedback, and also really the key is like, if it's working, let us know too, because that's just as effective as knowing what is not working. So let me put that in the chat right now, and I'll share this with you all in the Slack channel. Okay, let's go back to full screen. And you should have all received your first seed funding up to this point, hopefully. If you haven't, give me a Slack message, okay? DM me in the Slack and then we'll figure it out. And with that, please just track at the high level what you're spending these things on. We don't want to get receipts or whatever, but we want to know what you're spending on because we want to calibrate for future cohorts. Where are the most needs so that, if we get more funding in the future, we can direct it even more so and provide even more additional funding for those as well. Connect with your mentors. That's a given. Hopefully you have. If you haven't, do so immediately. Demo day, keep that in your mind, May 15th. More detail about this later. And if you haven't signed up to talk with me, please do so. I've already chatted with 2 of you, yay. But please sign up. I'm happy to talk. I've seen a whole bunch of you sign up, but that's just like the minimum floor, should we say? It's the floor. I welcome you signing up to more slots later as you need. Please use me as your at-large mentor, bouncing off ideas additionally, in addition to your primary mentor, okay? Any questions, comments, thoughts at this point so far? Please unmute yourself and go right ahead. Looks like everybody's good. All right, that's fantastic. Okay, so if you forget everything today, okay, I'm going to start with the end in mind. So after this, you can leave. Kidding. Please remember that you got to start with the problem. For those of you who chatted with me already, I've stopped you all from telling me what you're doing and asked you immediately what is the problem you're trying to solve, because a problem well stated is a problem half solved. And this is a principle that I really have taken to heart, and I'm always pushing pretty hard to get all our fellows and anybody joining SAI to articulate this particular concept. Because most of the time, this is what happens. People start with a solution and go to the problem, right? They try to figure out, hey, I have this solution in mind. I think it's going to work beautifully. It may solve this problem. I don't care. But they don't really take the time to think through about the problem that is inherent and that they're trying to solve. So, of course, we live in a solution-driven world. Solutions get a lot of hype, right? And they should, of course, but I think the problems, in fact, are just as important, and it's dangerous when you're just running on solution drive all the time, because then you have no anchor and you find yourself, it can be swung in any given direction at any time. So definitely anchor yourself with the problem. And there are lots of interesting solutions right out there, and these are actual real programs of STEM related programming, shall we say. Don't worry, none of these are yours, okay? I took them all out. But these are actual real programs out there that are operating, and they come in all shapes and sizes, right? And some of them are interesting. You get to know who they're working for, who's the target audience, what are they actually trying to do. Again, I'm going to keep just going through here. Lots of these. In fact, you can go to our website. You can look at last year's ones as well, whether you're building professional development programs, inquiry-based tools. Some of you may notice some of these mimic your own initiatives 100%. Don't freak out, okay? This is actually the point, that there's a lot of overlap. There's so much overlap, all right? And part of the reason is that there is this lack of articulation of the problem, because the problem, people just run into, oh yeah, that's the problem I'm trying to solve, increase the number of women in science, which is fine, but that is a loaded question. That is a loaded question, right? So you have an opportunity, especially for most of you starting from scratch, to really get this right from the beginning, okay? Before you get deep in the weeds, because you will. But I'll keep going. There's so many of them. And some are really good, right? They're very focused, helping minority female in K through 12 in New York. You see how specific they get, right? Then the audience becomes very clear. As you may notice in your workbooks, the question about who's the audience is super important to articulate, okay? But lots of solutions, okay? But what about the problem? What is the problem? We tend to rush straight to solution space, okay? So I tend to think of these solution space, problem space. Problem space is in fact where I spend most of my time, okay? Our summer program that we have is based on the problem space. In fact, they come in and they work on a proposal to solve with us, which is really, really exciting. And so again, remember, problem well stated is a problem half solved. This is something that I'll keep drilling in you for the next 10 weeks or so. So I apologize in advance. Why is the problem space so interesting? Because you really get to spend the time there, get the background right, get the context right. What is the scope of the problem, the impact, and then the framing of the problem. Framing of the problem is so critical. In the solution space, quite different, because there you're talking about what is currently existing, and then what are you building? What's your prototype? Are you educating students? Okay, because this is going to be critical, because it's going to connect to your own intended outcomes, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Okay, but definitely do, when you're in your mind, right, begin to create the problem space and solution space, because this will help you pivoting. This will help you if you get stuck eventually. And most importantly, it will help you pitch this to potential funders and other entities that you may encounter. So it would also help you not commit the following thing. Avoid committing the sunk cost fallacy, right? Now, assuming most of you are in early stage, the danger, of course, is as you get further and further along, the invested time, money, right? It actually becomes harder down the line to make that correction. So if you get to this decision point here, do I continue or not? If you spend so much time or done your work and you find out that actually the question is either incorrect or improperly framed, you're less likely to switch because you've invested so much time. But if you're aware of it, you will be more likely to say, okay, actually, this is the right point to switch, because the invested time is not going to yield any benefits. Right? Think of reading a book, right? You're reading this 500-page book, you're midway through, it sucks, right? Let's just imagine it sucks. And most of us would just keep going, right? Because you don't want to be that person. Oh, I only read half of it. I spent, $20 on it. We commit this regularly, every day, so it permeates in all that we do. But if you're aware of it, you can escape it by asking these questions, framing the correct problem, and being flexible to go back between the two. You can be willing to let go of these assumptions that you have, okay? And then say, okay, you know what? I actually want to see if there's a better solution out there, a better approach than the one I have. Just to give you an example, this is a case study. You may have seen this already, the slow elevator problem. So I'm going to read it for you. So you're the owner of an office building, and your tenants are complaining, okay, that the elevator is old, it's slow, and they have to wait a lot. And a few of them are threatening to break their leases if you don't fix the problem, okay? So what do you do? Please unmute yourself and tell me, what would you do if you're in this office building manager shoes. And please don't be shy. It's okay. There's no wrong answers here. Okay.
I would ask them, how is it, like, how specifically is that affecting them?
Okay. How is it affecting them? So you're gonna get more data. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Nisha. Anybody else?
I mean, I would want to look into how much it would cost me to fix this
Okay.
thing.
Okay. How much it would cost you to fix it? Okay, that's another one. Great. Thank you, Caroline.
The rental increase they would tolerate if the elevator was upgraded.
Okay. Okay. Again, these are good questions, right? You're thinking about the actual users, kind of get more information. So thank you for those insights. And so this is, I encourage you to go and take a look at this reference because they've done a lot of work in this area thinking about this issue. So if you break up the problem again in problem space versus solution space, the first level, right, easy. If you look at the issue, right, they already told you it's slow. So that's an easy one. The elevator is slow. So we can replace the elevator. And as Caroline said, was asking how much is it going to cost, and you can do all that assessment. You can upgrade the motors, right? Maybe it's a cheaper thing to do versus replace the whole thing. Better algorithm, so it can skip some floors, whatever, to get people from one area to the next. But the next level, right? If you dig a little bit deeper, the weight is annoying, right? That's another set of problem completely. The weight is annoying, so you could, in fact, think about, well, I'm going to add music in the elevator. You guys have noticed there's music in the elevators, right? I can add mirrors. Ever wonder why there are mirrors in elevators? Yeah, right. It takes time away, right? You forget that you're in this elevator. And of course, you can add TV screens, and there are a bunch of elevators, of course, that have TV screens. Each of these has its own cost, of course, but it is addressing a different part of the problem, right? You've completely reframed the issue. The issue, in fact, could be that the people define the weight super annoying. So I'm going to fix that problem. It's not that the question or you're framing the problem completely differently. You're finding a different aspect of the problem to solve, right? And that gives you an opportunity to really think innovatively about other ideas, other solutions that others might not think so. And this is another case study just to give you an additional point, the dog adoption problem. Dogs are very popular in the US. Industry stats suggest more than 40% of US households have one. But this fondness for dogs has a downside. According to estimates, one of the largest animal welfare groups in the US, more than 3 million dogs enter shelter each year and are up for adoption, right? And so what do? I will spare you the getting you guys to answer the question, but you can, again, break the issue up into problem space and solution space. As so a few of you mentioned earlier, you can do your homework, kind of get more additional data. First level, lots of dogs in shelters, yes. So easy solution is to add more ads for adoption, right? So you guys have seen these on TV, right? They come up like pretty much every day. And that's an easy one at the top. And there are few organizations that do that. If you keep digging, right? If you do your homework, one interesting piece of data, 30% of the dogs that enter the shelter are owner surrenders. And that gives you a whole slew of additional information to ask, right? Why is that, right? Money, time, lack of knowledge. These are all question points that you can now develop and think through for your own initiative, which would be, well, what if we keep the dogs with the original families in the first place, right? Develop better background checks at the beginning, so the inputs, maybe at the output when people try to drop off the dogs, they're surrendering them, better education, more funding is an issue with money at the home. So you can imagine having organizations at each of these levels that are doing these things. And in fact, there's an organization that completely flipped the script and are doing this part in the bottom here, where they just they asked a very different kind of question, right? How do we stop the surrendering of dogs in the first place? And so it allows you to think differently about the problem. So the question for you, all of you, to keep in mind, does your solution fit the problem? Okay. And don't freak out if it doesn't at this point. Okay, maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. But if it does, how so? But you want to be in this space here because this is where all the fun is. I'll tell you, it's a lot of fun in this space when you build really creative things. So why should we even practice reframing the problems, right? Revealing unexpected solutions, better understand the problem. It's fun, all the above. If you're thinking D, you're in my world, okay? D is where all the fun is, because the point of reframing is not to find the real problem, okay? Please remove that from your heads. It's rather to see if there's a better one to solve, okay? Is there a better problem in that space? I say this, as I mentioned at the beginning, you notice all the overlapping scenarios, right? People fixing the solution. There's a ton of overlap in this space. There's a ton. And what that means, the graveyard is very large, okay? A lot of initiatives are launched and a lot of them die, okay? And a lot of them die because of that lack of problem solution fit, which then ends up affecting your ability to connect with donors, to connect with funders and so forth, okay? The connections are all there, so you wanna be really careful at this stage. But though, how do we search for the problem solution fit? And this is where the logic model comes in. So I hope you guys, if you haven't yet, please read that Kellogg Foundation Logic Model Development Guide. It has some really good framework to explain what a logic model is. So just to show you this, it's a theory, visual linking all the connections between the problem, which we've talked about, the solution, activities, outputs, outcomes, a whole gamut, okay? Intended impact desired by a given program. And this is a critical aspect. It's in this visual diagram that shows you all the links. So in other words, it's a link of causes and effects leading to a measurable outcome, to measurable outcomes of interest, right? And this is an important aspect. You need to think about those outcomes that you're trying to change. What is that behavioral change that you seek to create? And this is what it looks like when it's all put together into one framework. In your logic model workbooks right now, all you're seeing is this bottom half. Page 2 is the inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes. The first page is really the elaboration of the problem and your hypothesis, right? Who's it for? And how do you know what's comparable to what you're proposing? And the point is, these connections, these logical connections, right? Some problem, and you have an hypothesis as to how you can fix it, and then how do you actually do it? Operations down here, okay? So the first this week and next, you're gonna be focusing mostly at the top two here, the problem and the solution, and the connections to your outcomes specifically. I've added as well, and it's not in your workbooks, but these assumptions, these are really important, right? What does your approach assume? And this will come in later when we do the SWOT analyses for your initiatives. So another way to think of a logic model is essentially a series of if-then statements, right? If you have certain resources, money, time, and so forth, then you'll be able to do the following activities that are blah, 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 right? Trainings or podcasts, whatever have you. And then you're going to be able to do your outputs, okay? The outputs are the activities that a program delivers, the number of training sessions, the number of attendees to the, whatever it is that you have, number of views to YouTube, okay? Your outputs. The outcomes are completely something else. Outcomes are the change in behavior that is taking place, okay? The change in behavior that is taking place. So don't get the two confused, okay? And next week, Sarah will give you sort of this evaluation side of the equation to think about. But outcomes, if you deliver the services, you've delivered the training sessions, what is that change that's taking place? What did the people learn, right? What did your audience learn? Or if you're doing artistic things, what change, if anything, took place? And this is where you need to engage them directly to figure out what that is, okay? And so I'm going to skip this logic models here. We have tons of logic models at SAI, a lot of them, okay? And I'm very colorful. I like colors a lot. But I will show you the one for the program, this program, okay? And notice here, version 3, okay? It's only version 5, actually, or 6 or something. I've gone through multiple renditions of this. It changes every day. In fact, I have a Google Doc with just logic models, and I'm always looking at it and changing it, okay? So tip number 1 for you, when you create that logic model, don't make it static. Do not make it static. This is a dynamic document. If you have a team that you're building for your initiative or organization, make sure they have access to this. They can see it for themselves, okay? So that they can pitch in and suggest like, oh, okay, I have a tip for an output that we could measure, the outcomes, what directions each one is going, okay? But this is something that I wanted to show you to see, like, this is what once you guys are done, you could have something like this that then is dynamic and lives throughout as well. It helps you really start thinking about your metrics and your KPIs and what exactly are you tracking and so forth. Okay. Of course, logic models come in diverse shapes and sizes. In fact, they are kind of crazy. They can get really, really intense. So this is one just example. And for you, don't try to read anything, just look at the structure. Okay, the structure is what I want you guys to see. And people can get really fancy. You can do intermediate outcomes, long-term outcomes, short-term outcomes. You can get into really fancy breaking out of your outcomes, and giving direction to each of the outcomes, which way is it going, up, down, the activities that you're doing, what exactly is it that you're doing. Once you have this document, right, at the end, it becomes easy to start talking to people. If you're recruiting, there was a question at the beginning last week on how do you get people early, right, volunteers and so forth. When you have something like this, it makes it super easy to start walking them through the logic model of what you're trying to do. And then they can give you really good feedback about what doesn't make sense, okay? And here's another one, again, just high level as well. And then this, I like this one actually because they talk about the metrics. What is the data for each of the outcomes, right? That I'm going to be tracking. And that becomes useful as well. And here's another one, but I'll spare you that. So keep in mind that logic model can also be used at the individual level. Please definitely use it as such. I personally call it the professional logic model. You can just swap out the logic model at the end of the program to individual, okay? A theory of change linking all your connections between the problem that you seek to change in the world. You're working apart the C's, can be many of them. What exactly are you doing? Okay, are you building a program? Are you doing interviews? Are you a faculty member? Okay, and what are your outputs? What are you measuring, right? What is measurement of output for you as an individual? And then your outcomes, the change that you seek to create in the world. What is that, right? You get asked that question once in a while, right? What change do you want to create in the world? Well, you can visualize it in a nice logic model professionally as well. But here's the thing. I'm willing to bet none of you have this professional logic model. You may have an individual development logic model, but most people don't have a professional logic model or even the logic model for their programs, okay? And that is, I think, something that, if anything, again, today, another point, start building it today, all right, professionally and also for your program. Build one and then keep iterating, keep iterating, keep iterating. It has helped me and a lot with SAI, building it from scratch and just stating these things on paper and then letting people chime in and provide feedback. Again, the most important thing is to identify, right? Identification and framing of the problem. It all leads back there. All roads start there and they lead back there. Because even in your solutions, in your outcomes, sorry, they have to be connected back to your problem. Are they actually addressing the problem that you intended to? And of course, you may come up with unintended effects, and those are wonderful. They could be negative, of course, but keep in mind there are some unintended effects that you may want to build in to keep in mind that they may happen as you build. So spend quality time in the problem solution space, because this is where a lot of excitement will be. The what, when, where, who. All right. So for all those of you that have not talked to me yet, this is what we're going to be doing. Every time you talk to me, this is where I'll be spending most of my time with you at the beginning, asking to frame the problem for me. Is that the best framing of the problem? Right. And the same concept can be applied professionally as I ask you, like, what problem are you, how are you framing the problems of your life? The meaning and how you're building that out, and where does this initiative that you're building fit into this, right? Where does this initiative that you're creating, your work that you're doing, the body of work you're creating, where does it fit? Because all of us, I know we're doing lots of crazy stuff out there, different programs, but they all can be fit into this logic model that you're creating. So don't assume stuff, do your homework, get some numbers down. It's amazing. It's amazing and scary, scary. And where people come in and they're doing these initiatives and they're not really sure about the numbers around their problems, right? Don't assume things. Try to get some basic numbers. If it's an intuition, make sure you at least have a sentiment of this is, you know, only one of three young people out there in the country have mentors, right? And you can begin to frame the problem. Suddenly, if you're pitching to a funder, they can already see the problem very quickly, right? 1 in 3 young people don't have a mentor, and the problem stems from blah. And my solution is blah, right? Suddenly you're right there in about 30 seconds. You have their attention, okay? And the way you do that, you got to talk to your audience. You got to talk to them. We don't do enough of this. So social media is a great tool for this. You can do all the surveys you want. Twitter can do this for you. Don't assume things. Don't assume that you know what your audience wants. Of course, you may have intuition. That's fine. But test that intuition. Test your assumptions against people that will be using it as well. Okay. So again, for this week, this is what you have, right? You're focusing on the first 2 parts, the problem articulation. If you have not downloaded the logic model workbook right now, please do so. So the idea is you download it, it's a Google Doc, and then share it with your advisor, somehow your mentor, okay? So the way I do it with my mentees, we have a shared Google Doc, and they do updates on the document, and I get pings when they have updated, and I go in there and I make comments on it, okay? So in that way, it's gonna be living for the next 10 weeks, and we're gonna be iterating throughout. It's an iteration document. That's why it's fairly short, but the questions being asked are quite deep and they can change dramatically. So my tip for you is to not just work on yourself on the side, but just share it as early as possible and get that feedback now. And as you talk to other people, other people to connect you with during the program, you can share it if you're comfortable to share it and let them chime in on what they think on your idea. And I hope you can see the connection, right? The logic model really will help you think through your own pitch deck that you're developing, the problem, the solution. If you do your homework, of course, you'll understand the landscape as to how does it fit into the overarching framework. It's different, how, it's better, how. And then the traction is really your outcomes that you either already have, or even your outputs and your outcomes that you already have, what you plan to track. For example, these can be plans that you say, hey, I plan to measure this, and this is what I hope to see, right? Because I'm not assuming that you guys will have full traction by the end of this program. Yes, we want you to launch, but traction, I think, is also plans for traction is fine, okay? Thinking through about what is it that you think you'll be able to assess and get out of it. Funding model, we're gonna have a whole lecture about this later, and I'll give this myself, and we'll give you tips on the funding models. You have access to our entire funding database, all our grants that we know about so far. We keep adding things to it. Please check it out. It's in the funding folder. But again, I hope that you can see this logic model will help you build this thing throughout, and then use these slides wherever you go, right? There's tons of pitch competitions out there you can apply for. And most of these funders, again, very quickly want to understand what is it that you're trying to solve, right? Who is having the problem, when and where, and then what are you doing about it? How is this different? You know, how is it the same? These are things that, again, I hope this problem solution, thinking about that problem solution fit will help you really nail down that idea. I'm going to stop there for now. This is for next week, but any comments, any questions, I'm happy to entertain. If you have any thoughts right now, please go ahead. I've refrained from putting you all on the spot and try to articulate your problems, but we could do that if you want. But questions, just overarching, if anybody wants to share them, please go right ahead.
Hey, I have a quick question.
Hey, Morgan.
Hey, how are you? Any suggestions for gauging if your target audience maybe is too small? Like, I'm very focused in the field of civil engineering. like I see a future where other engineering branches could be included, but like I'm kind of focusing on the area I know for now. So ways to figure out if that's too small.
It depends on the impact that you seek to create, right? I think you need to ask yourself, what is the change that you seek to create, right? In this, but I think that's where you can get started by asking those series of questions and talking with even the side that you have right now. Talking to them will help you think through what's missing, right? What other initiatives can I connect with? I think at the beginning, it's really about identifying and connecting the dots, specifically the problem and your solution. Then you can build from that. And it's perfectly fine for it to expand over time. You don't have to figure it all out in day one. I think day one is to assess that problem solution fit and then thinking through the potential audience.
Thank you.
No problem.
I
Would
had a
any-
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I love like kind of the logical accountability of these kinds of frameworks, and like starting at step one and like having a hypothesis, right? This is kind of like, we'll do this and we expect these outcomes. That's really, I think that plays to people in STEM. There's also an element, I think, of like when do you know enough? And I think, when do you know that you have what you need in order to make some decisions, invest some money, invest some time, maybe like seek, kind of the bigger investments, and see if you can make a go of it. And so do you have, how do we avoid the analysis or the paralysis by analysis kind of stuff?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Thinking through like when is like a good time to make that go decision, commit, right? I have this, can I keep going back? Can I live in problem space forever? No, you don't want to live there forever, because then nothing will get done. What you want to do is get glimpses of it, right? By talking to your users, you should be able to get to a point where you're getting this feedback. They're telling you yes, 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 right? And in fact, you start getting overwhelmed of the fact that, listen, people want this, they need this, right? There's a common phrase when they say, when do you know you have product market fit? It's really hard to find that out. And so once you have problem solution fit, right, then the solution becomes, does the solution fit the market, broadly speaking, right? That's when, if things are breaking, if you just can't keep up with the demand, right, something's happening, something is telling you right in the right direction. Whether it's teachers you're working with, they're responding, they want more and more and more, something is right? And you keep following. That's when you can start making decisions as to, do I want to keep going? However, you need to test your assumptions. You need to keep testing your assumptions. You can't just commit and then forget about it. Make sure you don't commit that fallacy I mentioned earlier, the sunk cost fallacy, because once you keep going down that road and suddenly you're too far down and you haven't been going back and testing your beliefs, you may find yourself going in a whole different direction. So pay attention to signals. What's the feedback? What's the demand? Okay, is it overwhelming? Also, another signal: people want to join your team, right? That's as you're explaining. Are they seeing the value of what you're saying? How are they pitching the organization back to you? Right. I always do this with SAI, and I say, okay, what did you hear me say? And then I hear all sorts of things. And so I don't profess to tell you that I think we have achieved that product market fit. I don't think so. I like for us to be continually innovating and testing our assumptions continuously. But you will feel it. It's a feeling. It's a mixture of data, and it's exciting too. And when things go wrong, that's when, like, the data will be telling you, like, actually, people are not responding to this the way I thought they would. Right. That's when you should stop and reevaluate as to what's going on and so forth. So, it's a good question.
I also have a question. So what I get is this is like a feedback orientated things once we launch our project, but what if there are like feedbacks that come in opposite or like have like different directions, then how do you decide like which feedback to take or not?
Yeah, that's hard. You're gonna get a lot of feedback, okay? Even your advisors will tell you X. You may come to me and I'll tell you Y. And then it gets really fun, okay? Then you have to figure out, oh, who do I listen to? But that's the nature of this game, right? You're gonna have to triangulate data, okay? I would hope you don't rely on only one piece of information. You triangulate different pieces of information to make a decision and be open to be wrong. That's the beauty about this. Be open to be wrong and learn quickly from that mistake and learn and move on. Okay. That's my advice to you. And you want to be doing that quickly, because if you sit there and brood on it for like 3 or 4 months, people have already done half the work, so try, iterate, and especially measure the cost and benefit analysis. Like, how much time will it take you to commit? If it's like a quick website build, just test it quickly and see if it's a valid thing to proceed. If it's a much more time-intensive decision point, you kind of want to take time to really dig through and make sure that people, hey, if I do this, what do you think, will happen? Get data and adapt. But be open to be wrong, okay? Be open to be wrong. Even some of your ideas won't work. And that's okay. But the trick is you need to find out sooner versus later. Okay. So I do have, I'm going to put some people on the spot. Okay, so please forgive me in advance. So I was going to ask, let's see, Morgan, if you can frame your problem for us, could you try that? And people will give you people can chime on the feedback. Go for it.
Sure. Okay, so let's use the problem approach. So one issue is that women are historically underrepresented in engineering. And another issue is that specifically civil engineering has an aging workforce. So I can get a number on that, but people are retiring at a much faster rate than they're entering. So my problem is, how can we fill that gap, and can we use underrepresented groups and energy to start filling that gap?
That's a good spread. Feedback from anybody else? Any thoughts and responses to that? What questions do you have? More questions do you have?
I'd be curious to know if you know where women are not entering that sector, right? Like, are there people just at undergrad level, they're not starting in engineering, or is it like they hit like, maybe they even get their master's or their PhD, but then they can't find jobs? Is it a student problem? Like, people aren't entering as students, or professionally they're not staying engineers?
Yeah, that's really good framing. I do know, again, I think it's a really good idea to get some data behind it, but I do know the enrollment for women in civil engineering is up, but the representation in the workforce is still not climbing as at the same rate. So I think there's maybe like you said, a gap in job placement.
Yeah, and this helps you get closer to what should you build and for whom, right? Because the pipeline for women is so broad, right? So that think through that, like, where is this problem statement? Jackie.
At what level are you aiming kind of this, well, just as far as like having young folks envision themselves in this field? Is that going to be aimed at like K-12 incoming area? Like, what kind of, not advertising, but advertising for civil engineers are you envisioning for what level of learning?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be important. Like whether I want to like work on a section of the pipe. Okay, I'm going to be a civil engineer now, or do the whole pipe. I definitely think that there's sort of like this gap. Like, people can maybe see themselves enrolling, but they don't see themselves going towards a career. So maybe giving a little steps along that way. So some K through 12 activities, some college engagement, some professional engagement, like all within, the same platform, so you can step by step. It's sort of how I'm envisioning like the solution to look, but yeah, that might be broad. That might be, yeah.
This is good.
Thank
I
you.
love seeing you think through this.
I am thinking. Yeah, this is good.
Yefei, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Okay, you give it a go. Frame the problem for us? I guess you and Chris on the same team, so you guys can double team if you want.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'll introduce Chris. He'll join on some of the calls. He's a member on our team, developer and former professional soccer player. I always say that about him when I get to introduce him.
Embarrassing.
And no, not embarrassing at all. When I'm the project lead on Third Room, you can see that we're testing different virtual backgrounds to see which one is cooler. Chris, we can't see the Third Room. The text is small, but that's why I like this one. But we'll let you all decide. So our platform. So our concept is a platform to connect young people to industry professionals in STEM for mentorship and informal networking. The problem we're trying to solve is that students lack, young people, I should say, lack the social capital to move into STEM careers and to persist. We see that heightened during COVID, where there's a lot of free resources, free curriculum, free content, but with all that resources, we don't see equal amount put into social capital. So for us, it's really trying to bridge that social capital divide. And at the moment, we're focused on high school students. But I can define that even more specifically. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, the floor is open, people. Let's hear them take apart the question, the framing of the question. John, are you going to try? Let's see, I don't know, you keep unmuting and muting.
I just want to ask, like, for some, like, connecting the students to mentors, and do you have like a specific industry or just industry in general, or in the tech industry or any other specific industries, or just in general?
Yeah, at the moment, our sort of entry point is biopharma in Massachusetts. So we're looking at employers locally, looking at local schools. We did some work with rural students in Western Mass. But recently we're thinking about the urban space as well. And I would say even what I just said there, we could do a better job of defining that more. Like there's different size of companies, there's some companies are a little bit more, if you had to plot them on a continuum, they're a little bit more closer to the types of employers that we think would really want this. These are employers that perceive that our platform is a way to solve a long-term talent issue. So even within life sciences, not every company is equal in the way they think about this issue. So we sort of need to come up with, within that subset, who are the ones we really want.
Yeah, so Yefei, like, I guess I'm a little confused because you mentioned that you talk about talent search, then you're targeting high schoolers. I still don't know what exactly is the problem that high schoolers are having. Exactly, you mentioned social capital, but that could literally mean anything. I hope you know where I'm going with this. Anyway, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering the question here, but briefly, there's research, that talks about how exposure to real human beings is related to motivation, efficacy, and persistence, like real mentorship or connections. And a lot of students don't have that. We surveyed a couple hundred students and 2/3 of them don't know a single STEM person. So right away, it's like, so they don't know the people to associate themselves with, whether they're in civil engineering or any other scientific discipline. But we're building a marketplace, right? So we have multiple users, ideally interacting with our technology. So it's complicated in the sense that there's not the value is different for each type of user. So the student is on there looking for inspiration, motivation, guidance, but the employer is paying for it, looking for, man, if I can get my people to interact with young people, my employees, over time, I can start to build a grassroots community, you know, of high school students going to college, perhaps college students going into their first summer internship that I can recruit from. So it's tricky, you're right, Matt, and like depends on the audience. Like if we're pitching to employers, it's a different kind of pitch than if we're getting in front of students and teachers, and it takes less convincing, I think, for the K-12, but on the employers, it's still a very new concept that this thing can actually address talent issues.
Yeah, so there are some companies, at least in Boston, that are trying this at the PhD level, like, you know, more employees, employees, sorry. But I think your question, you're asking multiple questions in one, right? And that's a challenge. I think you're gonna have to think through that a little bit more as to what exactly is, like, what is that change you seek ultimately at the end of the day, okay, that you want to create, and then how does your platform address it? Your platform can try to address multiple things at once, but the danger is you may end up not doing either of them well. So you just want to be careful with that. It's early enough, you can still, maybe you're searching for it, right? Which is probably the case. But yeah, and I look forward to chatting with you directly as well about this. So I want to try, thank you for that. I want to try one more. Let's see. Actually, would anyone want to go themselves instead of me picking on them? And if not, I will pick someone.
I just wanted to contribute one quick thing to our previous discussion with Yifei and Christopher. Just that you're focused on, it seems like you're contacting industries, so it's more like internships in an industry rather than necessarily an academic setting, or are both options. And that's just kind of throwing that out there. But my lab is actually mentoring a couple of students through this program that I stuck in the chat, which is the Biological Interactions Research Program, which is doing that sort of like providing an experience that is guided and funded for the students so that they can focus completely to contributing to some aspect of a research program for a 10-month kind of embedded program. But yeah, as far as framing your question, if that's something that is along the lines of what you're envisioning for Massachusetts, it might be worth looking into that sort of program and what are they targeting, kind of thing as well.
Definitely, thank you. I made a note of that too. I was just copying that down, so thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Great, thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Jackie.
Caroline, I was going to pick on you at some point.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. You want to frame the problem for us?
Sure. So I would say the problem that I have perceived, and I have to admit this is not well researched, not in a formal way, is that I think that there is a lack in diversity in terms of storytelling and storytellers within science communication. And so my solution to that, hopefully, is to actually empower people, students, young people, to get a sense of self-efficacy in terms of science, and then also work on their visual communication. So that is my idea. And this really stems from the fact that I do move around in, I would say, more like art community circles. And I've heard some of the most devastating things, like people saying, oh, I hate data, or oh, that seems educational, and they are repelled from media people are making to try to actually make science more accessible. Something about what's out there, some of it at least, is not working. And so I'm trying to get over that, get around that somehow. And I think maybe I'm not the person, this postdoc from Harvard, maybe I'm not that person who's relatable to an audience, but I could help somebody else who is more relatable make that material. All right, that was long-winded. Come at me.
The floor is open. The floor is open.
Is this targeting kind of STEM in general or a specific subset of?
Right now, I think what's most feasible will be biology, because that's my background and that's my immediate network. So we're going to start there.
Yeah, I guess, Caroline, yeah, I don't know if I fully understand what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
This, by the way, is always my response to everybody. Okay,
that's totally fine. I did my workbook, and I have to admit, like, I have at least 2 answers for every question. I'm also a person of, I don't know, I haven't quite like totally crystallized a single project idea.
Yeah, so it goes down to that question, you said storytelling is so broad. I don't even,
Yep.
I think your phase platform could be a little bit of storytelling too. You can infuse in that, I can imagine already, right? So you definitely want to think through, like, what exactly is that issue, and who is having it, when are they having it. This is all for all of you now. The when part, people never address that part, which I think is so fascinating. The when is such a, you can target it, make it more targeted. Say, actually, this critical transition point when people are having this issue. All right, so definitely keep that in mind, and I look forward to chatting with you, Caroline, about that and seeing how it crystallizes formally at the end as well. Amanda was mentioning, oh yes, this is a good point. I was going to do that. You guys should collaborate. So Amanda, Caroline, Amanda is working on a similar idea as well. So visuals and oral storytelling. For people in that space, you definitely need to articulate the problem very, very carefully, because this is going to be tied to your impact, right? What change do you seek to create? What's going to be your KPIs, right? And you need to practice saying that, like, you can have a metric somewhere in there that's going to be like, if this changes in this direction, this thing is working, right? Are we always heading in the right direction? And to Naisha's question, and this is what I want to leave you all with, the slide I had earlier. So Naisha asked, for a sustainable project, when do we say this amount of outcomes is good enough? Or what is the amount of outcomes needed in order to consider the project successful, right? What does success mean? I think that's such a powerful question. And we're moving on once you've achieved that magic solution. This is a golden question. And when do you stop? In theory, things should be designed, and once they've achieved their goal, should be shut down, close shop, and move on, right? Of course, it depends on the nature of the problem you're addressing. So this figure here, imagine whatever the outcome variable is, right? So whenever you start, there will be some change, right? Some change, and that can go another direction, up or down, doesn't really matter, right? You're decreasing something or increasing, you're decreasing the time to graduate or whatever, or increasing the number of people in STEM available for the employers, or going into STEM, whatever have you. Self-efficacy and so forth. I think these issues are going to be, when do you stop? That's a tough question. I don't have a clear answer for you, Naisha. It's going to depend on your audience. I think most of the time, these things always generate more questions. As you know, in science, you fix one solution, you actually detect 10 more, right? So I hope you find that kind of situation whereby you continue to evolve and change, right? As you fix one thing, you're going to realize actually there's a bigger problem somewhere else, right? And the part of this is that you need to go back into that process of thinking through, what is the problem, right? I've addressed this part of the problem, okay? Let me rephrase it to say, actually, this is the other thing as well. So I hope we can continue having this discussion about success in this space, because it's really, really hard to define, and it varies depending on what you're working on and what solution you're designing.
Yeah, I was asking, sorry, I was asking because, like, for grants, for example, like, you have to have a specific outcome, a specific percentage or number for them to consider it successful. And I know it's based on what I proposed or what whoever proposed, but yeah, sometimes it's not as clear.
Yeah,
Right.
it isn't. And funders too, right? Funders want to see what is the change, the delta, right, that you've done. I think, yeah, as long as you're showing a delta. And for grants, by the way, they're gonna hold you to what you proposed. You know, you said you're gonna change this. Okay, did you change it? Did you increase the number of women going into STEM? And that's a really tall order. In what context, right? You got to think of context. And I think if the reading for this upcoming week, the chapter breaks down that, because people really usually rush and say, I want to increase the number of people in STEM. And this, I'm like, okay, great. But really, the needle there is not going to move by that much. And there are much more effective ways to do it, or matrices you can look at. So take a look at that reading for this upcoming week, because this chapter breaks down all the different metrics you can look at. And there are so many. Okay, and in fact, by doing so, you may discover new problems that are actually more in line with what you were trying to do, right? And that's the beauty about this, discovering these undiscovered questions, I think is way more interesting than the solutions. I almost don't care what you're trying to solve, but I am paying attention to the new questions people ask, and something people have not asked in a different way, that when the funders love that. Because then they're like, ooh, this has the potential to change something in a different way than we initially thought. This has been fun, guys. I hope you guys have, this was useful a little bit to set the stage, to think through, okay? It will help you hopefully for your pitches in not just here, but elsewhere. I'm always applying to pitches everywhere. Try my best to try, and then you get matched up most of the time with the mentor, and you give it a go. Sometimes you win some funding, yay. But please keep it in mind, problem, solution, fit, it really does matter, okay? And with that, this week, hopefully you can continue this discussion with your mentors, and that workbook begin to try to get at that, those questions that are there. The audience, who are they, when are they, and the rest of it. And with that, we are done for today.